Great and Laura. On the road again, but actually in the air again. Now that everything is settled after meetings and signings and all sorts of stuff, price tag, I believe, for everything is about $2.7 million.
Laura Wilson, known online as Laura Farms, never set out to be a star. She was just a young Nebraska farmer sharing her daily life, the dust, the noise, and the beauty of growing food. But behind the bright clips of tractors and harvest days was a deeper, more human story, one shaped by love, loss, and the weight of family legacy. Her journey shows that even in the wide open fields, heartbreak can strike close and change everything, even to the best and famous ones. Heartbreak in harvest season. Harvest season has a rhythm of its own. For farmers, it is the stretch of the year when sleep becomes a luxury. Meals happen on the go, and every hour of daylight feels too short. The fields turn golden, the machines come alive, and the pressure builds with every forecast, every cloud, every shift in the wind. For Laura Wilson and her husband Grant, one particular harvest would forever stand apart from the rest, because it was the season when joy, routine, and tradition collided with the deepest kind of loss. For Laura, her grandfather wasn't just an elder in the family. He was the person who shaped her first understanding of what it means to love the land. As a little girl, before she knew how to spell agriculture or operate a tractor, she remembered watching him walk the fields with that practiced stride, measuring the world not by miles or minutes, but by rows and seasons. He was the kind of man who knew the soil by touch, the weather by instinct, and the heart of farming by experience. To Laura, he was a living encyclopedia of stories, of hard seasons, good years, and the subtle knowledge that only comes from a lifetime in the fields. He taught her small things at first: how to scoop grain without wasting it, how to latch a gate properly so cattle wouldn't nudge it open, how to sit quietly and watch the horizon, because sometimes patience is the best tool a farmer has. He showed her the rhythm of chores and the meaning of responsibility. But more than anything, he taught her that farming wasn't merely a job. It was a legacy, a promise made by one generation to the next. When Laura was old enough, he began bringing her into the routines that defined family farming. She remembered riding beside him in the truck, her feet barely touching the floor, listening as he talked about rainfall, soil health, seed choices, and the old stories about how their ancestors emigrated from Sweden and built the farm from scratch. He didn't talk down to her, he talked to her. As if even at 7 or 8 years old, she was someone who could carry the torch one day. And she did. Those memories became the foundation of her future. Her grandfather's steady voice, his gentle patience, his ability to turn every mistake into a lesson. All of that shaped the farmer she eventually became. But nothing can prepare someone for losing the person who taught them everything. When Laura received the news of his passing, it was harvest season, one of the busiest, most demanding times of the year. It felt cruel that the world kept moving while her own heart paused. The fields still needed to be harvested. The weather didn't stop. Machinery didn't wait. The crops didn't care that the man who once walked those same acres with her was suddenly gone. She pushed through, because that's what farmers do. But inside, grief wove itself into every part of her day. She felt it when she climbed into the tractor, remembering how he once boosted her up onto a seat that seemed impossibly high. She felt it when she passed the barn he used to mend tools in. She felt it most at dusk, when the sun dipped behind the fields and the world went quiet, the same way it used to when she rode beside him as a child. If that loss had been the only one, it would have been enough to break the season. But heartbreak has a way of compounding, and Grant was fighting his own storm. Almost unbelievably, around that same time, Grant lost his grandfather too. Two young farmers, newly married, building their life, managing a farm, growing a following online, suddenly found themselves grieving side by side, each carrying their own memories, their own pain, their own sense of disorientation. Grant's grandfather had been a pillar of his life as well, the kind of man who fixed everything with a quiet confidence and taught Grant that a farm isn't just land, it's a responsibility to those who came before you. Losing him meant losing a guide, a supporter, a piece of his foundation. For Grant, stepping into a combine that season felt different. The seat beside him was empty, but the memories sat heavy. The two of them, Laura and Grant, had to continue working because farming doesn't pause for grief. Crops don't wait. Machinery doesn't care. Bills don't delay themselves. Harvest comes when it comes, and farmers must rise to meet it no matter what is happening in their hearts. But behind the steady hum of tractors and the rush of long days, they were grieving deeply. There were nights when they drove home separately, each staring at the road ahead while replaying childhood memories. There were mornings when they put on their boots with swollen eyes, reminding themselves that the work still needed them. And there were quiet moments in the fields when the weight of it all felt too much. But they stayed strong because that is what their grandfathers had taught them. To outside viewers, nothing seemed wrong. Laura still uploaded clips. She still smiled at the camera, still explained equipment, still showed harvest progress. But the camera never captured the heaviness in her chest when she stopped recording. It didn't catch the long silences between her and Grant, when they were too exhausted to speak. It didn't show the empty chairs at family dinners or the quiet spaces where grandfathers' voices used to fill the room. What made the heartbreak so piercing was that harvest itself is a season of legacy. It's the time when farmers feel their ancestors most, the people who planted before them, who taught them, who dreamed the same dreams. Harvest used to be a shared victory with their grandfathers, a symbol that another year of lessons and love had borne fruit. Now, it became a reminder of loss. Yet through the grief, something powerful remained. Laura and Grant leaned on each other, even in silence. They honored their grandfathers the only way they knew how, by working hard, by caring for the land, by continuing the legacy passed down to them. Every field they finished harvesting felt like a tribute. Every sunrise they worked through felt like a promise kept. By the end of that season, they were not the same people who had started it. They were stronger, not because their grief disappeared, but because they learned to carry it. They learned that heartbreak can live alongside purpose, that love can be the fuel behind difficult days, that loss, painful as it is, can deepen a person's roots in the land their grandparents once touched. Their grandfathers did not get to see every moment of their growing farm or their rising online influence, but their teachings lived on. In Laura's patience behind the wheel, in Grant's focus under pressure, in the way they ran their operation together, like two branches from the same old tree. Harvest gave them grief, yes, but it also gave them a deeper connection to the legacy they inherited. A reminder that farming is not just about crops. It's about the people who shaped you, the memories that stay in the soil, and the love that continues long after someone is gone. But grief wasn't the only weight Laura carried. Another burden had been building quietly for years. The weight she never wanted to admit. Heartbreak doesn't always come from a single moment. Sometimes it comes from a slow, steady pressure that builds over years, quiet, invisible, but crushing all the same. For Laura Wilson, the emotional weight she carried didn't begin online or through fame. It had been growing ever since she was a young girl running between rows of corn, knowing she belonged to a line of farmers who had passed this land from hand to hand like a fragile treasure. Being a fifth-generation farmer sounds noble, almost poetic. But behind that legacy is a pressure most people never feel. It means growing up knowing that your family's work, decades of sweat, sacrifice, and survival, rests partially on your shoulders. It means understanding that one bad year could erase years of planning. It means living with the quiet fear that if you fail, you're not just failing yourself, you're failing the generations that came before. For Laura, that pressure started early. Her family's farm was more than a place. It was a history book made of soil. Every fence post, every shed, every field had a story connected to someone she loved. When she walked the land with her grandfather, he didn't just teach her the how of farming, he taught her the why. Why they rotated crops. Why rain at the wrong time hurts. Why the land needed care the same way a family does. Why the farm wasn't just theirs, it was a responsibility entrusted to them. When you grow up hearing those things, they root themselves inside you. And Laura carried them into adulthood, even when she didn't speak about it directly. But the pressure didn't stop with family legacy. It grew louder when she stepped into the world of modern farming, a world dominated by men, older generations, and people who sometimes saw youth as inexperience and femininity as a flaw. She didn't just want to prove herself, she needed to, because she knew eyes were watching, online and offline, waiting to judge. At first, her videos were simple clips meant for friends. But then one of them went viral, and suddenly thousands of people were watching her every move, how she drove machinery, how she spoke, what decisions she made, what mistakes she posted. And with visibility came opinions, many supportive, but many painfully cruel. Strangers who had never stepped foot on a farm told her she didn't know what she was doing. Men twice her age left comments questioning her skills. Others accused her of using her looks to gain attention. Some claimed she wasn't a real farmer, reducing years of hard work to one dismissive sentence typed behind a screen. For someone who had grown up proving herself to her family, now she had to prove herself to millions of strangers. That took a toll. She never said it outright, but it showed in the way she carried herself during certain seasons. Those tired, quiet moments in her videos when her eyes told stories she didn't voice. Farming alone is exhausting. Farming while being watched by the world is something else entirely. Every mistake feels bigger when the world is watching. Every breakdown, mechanical or emotional, feels heavier when judgment waits in the comments. For Laura, the hardest part was balancing authenticity with expectation. People loved her because she was real, dusty, sweaty, tired, smiling anyway. But being real means showing flaws, and flaws online often attract criticism. So she learned to carry her struggles silently. She shared the work, the views, the progress, but rarely the emotional weight that sat behind the scenes. People saw the tractors, not the anxiety. They saw the fields, not the pressure. They saw the success, not the nights she lay awake wondering if she was doing enough. Then there was the responsibility of running an actual farm. Land rent, machinery maintenance, fuel costs, unpredictable weather, crop insurance, financial risk, things her followers sometimes admired but rarely understood. Every season was a gamble, and every gamble carried the burden of real money, real consequences, real fear. And through it all, she still had to show up. Every day. Not just as a farmer, but as a content creator, partner, and businesswoman. Her days looked different from most. Wake up early, feed animals, check fields, run equipment, film the process, edit footage, handle sponsorships, respond to audience messages, plan the next upload, then do it all again the next morning, and the next, and the next. Many creators burn out with half that workload. Many farmers burn out without a single camera pointed at them. But Laura was doing both. And most viewers only saw the highlight reel. Behind the scenes, the real heartbreak was quieter, the weight of responsibility pressing against her youth. She was barely in her 20s, yet carrying the emotional load of someone twice her age. She had to be confident when she felt uncertain, strong when she felt fragile, knowledgeable when she was still learning, and grateful even when she was overwhelmed. There were days when the loneliness of responsibility sat heavy on her chest. Farming can be isolating, long hours, wide fields, endless tasks, but being a public figure who farms adds a layer of isolation that no one can see. It's the feeling of being surrounded by people online, yet alone, in the cab of a tractor with thoughts that won't quiet down. Laura kept going anyway. She stood her ground in a male-dominated field. She worked through fear. She learned more every season. She built a platform not by pretending to be perfect, but by showing up consistently and honestly. The healing. And even though the weight of legacy and expectation pressed on her, she turned that pressure into purpose. She honored her family by choosing to farm. She honored her followers by showing the truth behind the work. She honored herself by refusing to shrink under criticism. And through it all, she carried heartbreak without letting it define her. But to understand Laura fully, we have to look beyond heartbreak and pressure, toward the resilience that carried her forward. The healing. Heartbreak leaves a mark, but what makes a person remarkable is how they rise after it. For Laura Wilson, the weight of losing her grandfather, supporting Grant through his own loss, and carrying the expectations of her family legacy could have easily broken her spirit. Instead, it shaped her. It didn't harden her. It strengthened her, the way fire strengthens steel. Yet that strength didn't appear overnight. It came slowly, quietly, in the small choices she made every day. At first, all she could do was keep moving. Farmers often say that work is healing because the land doesn't judge you. It doesn't ask you to explain why you feel tired or sad. It doesn't demand anything more than your honest effort. Laura found comfort in that simplicity. When the world inside her felt heavy, the world outside gave her something steady to hold on to. There were mornings when grief pressed against her chest as she walked toward the barn. But the familiar sounds, the hum of machinery, the rustle of animals, the soft grind of gravel under her boots gave her a sense of grounding. She wasn't okay yet, but she was moving. And sometimes that's the first step toward healing. With Grant, healing came differently. They didn't always talk about what they were feeling. Sometimes they didn't need to. They understood the quiet way grief shows up, how it sits behind your eyes, how it catches you when you least expect it. Some nights they shared stories about their grandfathers out of nowhere, as if remembering them suddenly became too important to hold in. Other nights they simply sat together in silence, letting presence speak louder than words. In moments like those, Laura realized that their marriage wasn't just built on partnership and shared work. It was built on the courage to be vulnerable. Pain didn't push them apart. It pushed them closer. Their grandfathers had been important parts of their childhoods, their upbringings, their identities. Losing them at the same time created a wound they both understood deeply, and that understanding became a new kind of bond. Then came the land, the endless teacher. With each sunrise, Laura learned something new about herself. The fields didn't look different from the outside, but inside, she was changing. The grief didn't disappear, but she learned how to carry it more gently, how to let it soften her instead of consuming her. When she climbed back into the tractor after everything, it wasn't just another workday. It was a choice to keep going, a choice to honor her grandfather's memory in the best way she knew, by working the same ground he once walked. The cab of the tractor became a small sanctuary, a place where she could think, cry, or breathe without interruption. There were moments when something as simple as the smell of diesel or the sound of grain hitting the bin reminded her of him so sharply that she had to blink back tears. But instead of avoiding those moments, she learned to accept them. The hurt meant he mattered. The memories meant he was still part of her. She realized resilience wasn't about forgetting, it was about learning to live with the remembering. Outside of the fields, her online presence became part of her healing journey too. She didn't share every detail of her grief, but she didn't hide it either. Sometimes her voice softened at the end of a sentence. Sometimes her eyes looked tired, and her followers, people all over the world, noticed. Some left comforting comments. Others shared their own stories of loss. It reminded her that she wasn't alone, that her honesty didn't make her weak, it made her human. And, in a strange way, her platform started giving back to her. The community she had built with her videos, advice, and openness became a source of support she never expected. But growth didn't stop at emotional strength. Laura also began to rise through skill. Her confidence behind the wheel grew. Her understanding of machinery deepened. Her patience with long days sharpened. Every season taught her something new. Every mistake taught her more. Her grandfathers had given her a foundation, but now she was building something that was entirely her own. A farm shaped by both history and innovation. A future built on both tradition and her own courage to evolve. As time passed, she also began to take more ownership in decisions, field planning, equipment choices, scheduling, workflow. People sometimes forgot she was still young because her leadership carried the weight of someone far older. She earned that respect, not by demanding it, but by showing up every day, even when the emotional weight felt overwhelming. She also learned to give herself grace. There were days when she worked harder than she should have, and days when she wished she had worked more. There were moments when she felt like she was thriving, and moments when she questioned everything. But each time she doubted herself, she remembered something her grandfather used to say: "You don't have to know everything, you just have to keep learning." That sentence became her anchor. Her healing didn't happen in a dramatic moment. There was no single sunrise where everything suddenly felt right again. Instead, it happened slowly, in the dozens of sunrises and sunsets she lived through with courage. It happened in the conversations she shared with Grant. It happened in the decisions she made for her farm. It happened in the way she chose to keep showing up. Resilience, she realized, wasn't something you achieve. It's something you practice. And Laura practiced it every day. By the time that difficult season ended, she wasn't the same person who entered it. She was more grounded, more patient, more aware of her strength. Grief had changed her, but so had the way she responded to it. She had taken heartbreak and turned it into fuel. Fuel for her work, her growth, her marriage, and her future. Her grandfathers were no longer walking the fields beside her, but their lessons were. And in that sense, they were still there. Quiet, steady, and proud. Farming and rise to social media fame. Wilson's journey into farming began long before anyone knew her as Laura Farms. She grew up in the wide open spaces of Nebraska, where fields seemed endless, and the rhythm of the seasons shaped everyday life. Farming wasn't just something her family did, it was a world she grew up inside. From the time she could walk, machinery, soil, and long workdays were simply part of her surroundings. Those early memories became the foundation of her identity, long before any camera ever captured her story. As a child, Laura learned through watching and doing. She saw how her family worked through scorching summers, icy winters, and unpredictable weather. She learned that crops didn't wait for convenience, and dedication mattered more than comfort. Her grandfather, in particular, played a huge role in shaping her connection to the land. He taught her that farming was more than planting and harvesting. It was stewardship, responsibility, and tradition. When he pointed out the importance of soil health or explained why timing mattered during planting, he was also showing her how to respect the land that fed her family. Those early lessons stuck with her. Even as she got older and explored other interests, farming remained the backdrop of her life. At a time when many people her age were drifting toward cities or digital jobs, Laura was drawn back to the fields. She found comfort in the work, pride in the results, and purpose in continuing her family's legacy. The farm became the place where she understood herself most clearly. Her social media journey didn't begin with a plan for fame. It started as a simple attempt to share what her real everyday life looked like. She picked up her phone, filmed short clips of her work, and uploaded them with no expectation of going viral. What she showed wasn't glamorous. It was dusty, noisy, messy, and real. But that authenticity was exactly what people wanted to see. At a time when social media often felt fake or overly polished, Laura's straightforward approach felt refreshing. Her videos captured moments that most people would never experience firsthand. Climbing into a tractor at dawn, adjusting equipment in the middle of a long day, watching storms roll in while hoping the crops survived. People who had never stepped foot on a farm suddenly felt connected to it. Viewers appreciated her clarity when she explained machinery or crop cycles, and they liked that she didn't sugarcoat the tough parts. She talked openly about exhaustion, long hours, and the unpredictability of farming life. Slowly, her following grew. Then, it grew faster. Within a short time, Laura became one of the most recognizable young farmers on TikTok and YouTube. Her audience ranged from fellow farmers to curious city dwellers who simply wanted to learn something new. Her videos started appearing on For You pages across the world, and her name became synonymous with modern, relatable farming content. Even as her numbers climbed into the hundreds of thousands, Laura kept her tone grounded. She continued filming from tractors, grain bins, and field edges, speaking in the same honest voice she started with. The more people watched, the more they appreciated her balance of education, humor, and sincerity. Fame didn't pull her away from the fields. It followed her there. Through consistent posting, patient explanations, and a willingness to show the not-so-pretty side of farming, she built a community that valued real work and real stories. And behind that rising public presence was a private life rooted deeply in the land she called home. Grant and Laura's genuine lifestyle. Laura's personal life was shaped by two forces that often overlapped: family and farming. For her, the two were never separate. The farm wasn't just a workplace, it was a living archive of memories, traditions, and the people who came before her. Every field held a story, and every shed had tools that had passed through generations of hands. Growing up in such an environment shaped how she saw the world and the role she believed she needed to play in it. Family responsibility was woven into daily life, and she carried that sense of duty into adulthood. Her relationship with Grant, who would later become her husband, also connected deeply to the land. He understood farm life, its stresses, and its constant demands. Their shared background created a bond built on mutual understanding, respect for hard work, and an appreciation for the unpredictable nature of agriculture. They didn't romanticize the lifestyle. They knew it required long days, late nights, and decisions that could make or break a season. The strength of their partnership came from facing those realities together rather than avoiding them. The heart of Laura's daily routine revolved around the farm's operations. Unlike curated online images, the real work required patience, planning, and physical endurance. She handled equipment, monitored fields, prepared for storms, moved grain, and adjusted plans based on conditions that shifted hour by hour. Farming demanded consistency, and she met that demand with determination. Her days often began before sunrise, and even when videos captured only a few minutes, the real work extended far beyond the camera's view. The crops themselves reflected the farm's identity. Corn and soybeans dominated the landscape, and each growing season carried its own challenges. Laura understood the stakes behind every planting decision, fertilizer application, and harvest deadline. She didn't just sit in machinery. She studied how soil health, weather patterns, and timing influenced yield. These weren't just fields to her, they were living systems she was responsible for maintaining. Inside the farm's daily rhythm were quieter moments that revealed more about her personality. She enjoyed the peace of early mornings, the satisfaction of freshly worked rows, and the sense of accomplishment after long days in the cab. Her personal life blended into these routines. Meals were sometimes eaten on the go, conversations happened between tasks, and celebrations often came after successful harvests. Life on the farm required flexibility, and Laura adapted to its rhythms with resilience. Her family remained central throughout it all. She often spoke about the support she received from her parents and the lessons passed down from relatives who had shaped her values. Her grandfather's influence lingered in her approach to farming, reminding her to take pride in the work, respect the land, and stay humble no matter how much attention she gained online. Even as her platform grew, she remained grounded because she never forgot where she came from. The farm wasn't just where she lived, it was an extension of who she was. Her personal life and professional work merged into one, creating a story built on dedication, grit, and love for the land that held her family's history. Laura's story reminds us how fragile life can be. Stay curious, stay kind, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that matter.